welcome back to Our Moment, a literary podcast with your host, Exquisite Williams. Hi guys, welcome back. I know last week we talked about slavery and we talked about the history in North Carolina, and I wanted to do that because I thought it was specifically important to finally talk about that for part 3. It's a big part of part 3, and I think it's very important. Yes, so we talked about that. I hope you guys all had a very wonderful Thanksgiving. We are back at it once again with the podcast episodes. Yes. So before next week, when we do a absolute breakdown of part 3, perhaps with a special guest from my book club, we never know because the kids are just a little bit shy. I think I really want to talk about the othering that Brianna goes through, right? I think that's important to talk about. So when I say other, I mean like the dictionary definition means to view or treat a person or group of people as intrinsically different from and alien to oneself. And we kind of mentioned it a bit in part 2. Brianna is in this world that is completely new to her, and she is new to it. She is the only black girl in the entirety of the order. She now is this new page, and she's going into these different trials. And we talked a little bit in part 2 with Devin. We talked about how the first trial, she kind of had to run around. We get the second and third trials in part 3, right? We get that in part 3 route. And Bree is different in the sense of what she can do with her ether. We know it's burning red, and we don't know anybody's ethers that's exactly quite like hers, right? So Bree is different, but in the definition of like other ring, they treat her differently. We've already experienced some of the racism that she gets treated from the people around her, especially, or the people in the order themselves. But not only is she like different, she has to go about things differently, right? So today I just kind of want to talk about, like, I don't want to go too deeply into the trials because I'm going to do that next week. But in her trials, Bree is going up against people who have been doing this sort of thing their whole lives, right? She's never done anything like this. So she kind of has to like get on her feet and figure out what the heck's going on. Does that make sense? Like she has to get an understanding of like everything that is happening, right? She has to like figure out her ground. So in order for her to compete against everybody else, she has to be able to understand how they worked and how they act and how she can take her uniqueness and go against them. This episode is also going to just be a little bit shorter because I am so excited to actually go into part 3. Like when I tell you I'm so excited, I'm being like so serious, like yeah, like very, very serious. So we also know something else about Bree that's special, and we learn this in the new chapter. Bree lets us know that every woman in her family, their mother has died young, as far back as she can remember. She didn't know her grandmother. Her mom had never met her grandmother. Her mom's mom had never met her grandmother, right? They die young. And that's another way that she feels othered. Like mentioned, this whole thing is about root and how that connects to you and passed down from your mom. She is even othered when she's around other black people because all of them have this connection with their mothers or their ancestors that Bree does not. She is very actively closed off from that aspect of her life. Like she doesn't have it, and there is no way that she can access it directly. I won't say no way because more story to go, so maybe she does actually access it, but she doesn't directly get it, and she can't directly get it. Like that is something that is lost from her in a sense. But yeah, so while Bree is othered, and I like to mention Bree's dad a lot, but no, so while Bree is othered often, she has to find her place in the order if she even wants to still be in it. Because once again, remember, Bree is only here to try and figure out what happened with her mom. So because not only is her heart not actively in it, she's also kind of like, they're treating her like garbage here, and everything just sucks a little bit. So, and this is all happening in part 3, and like there's so many things about part 3 that I can't talk about because I'm trying not to I'm trying not to spoil too much, you know. And so Brianna has to navigate making friends and deciding who she can trust and who she cannot trust. She has to navigate, once again, working around Cell, because Cell actively still thinks she's a demon. So he's othering her to that sense as well. Like, everyone is othering her. For Nick, she represents, like, a way to combat against the system of oppression that the vassals of the order, not the vassals, that the leaders of the order, the lieges kind of, that caused him to lose his mom. Once again, we talked about this when I broke down part 2 Discord. But so for Nick, she's that. For Cell, she's a demon who's trying to infiltrate. For a bunch of the other people, they're just like, this is some unknown who doesn't know. She hasn't been oathed. She doesn't know the way of this. She's so, like, doesn't get us. For William, who, once again, if we remember William, he's the sweet person who runs their little hospital area. She's other in the sense that she's something entirely new to him. He wants to be friends with her. So these are the ways, like, this book kind of shows us ways in which people interact with the other as well. Like, I keep saying the other, the person that they are othering. Like, they're the ones doing the othering. It's not something that, it's not, and othering is like, it's this label, and I won't say it's neither good nor bad, but it's how people interact with it. So once again, I'm going to say othering is a phenomenon in which some individuals or other groups are defined and labeled as not fitting in within the norms of a social group. And the norms of the order are white descendants of the Round Table for the most part, or white passing, because we do have one Hispanic character, but she passes as white, so she gets away with it. But she says she also still feels very othered by them, but not in the same way, because you cannot visibly see it. In part 2, there's a line where it says, like, the disruptors, but Bree is different. She is, and she, like, she said it in part 2, and I think it's really important. She said she's not going to try to keep quiet, right? She's not about being silenced. She won't let them silence her. So yeah. And then, while not going too much into spoilers, she has to talk with with Selwyn about how to like interact with the other people. I'm using the word other so much now, and I'm not doing it intentionally. But this is just what's going on to me now. I guess we're just going to be using this word irregardless of anything. And she has to talk with Cell, and Cell's kind of like, do you know why this keeps happening with the other pages? I won't tell you what keeps happening until the next episode of Our Moment. And she's like, it's because everybody has years of training on me. And Selwyn's like, no. It's because the other pages have a singular focus and you don't. Because you're here for more than one reason. The other reason is that they know their strengths well and use them. Redacted, because I don't want to spoil you. The fact that you're bumbling around this week tells me that you can't control your gifts, or you aren't trying to. Redacted. And then she goes, we have different priorities. And he goes, an understatement. And she tries to leave, and he's like, no, let me help you. And Selwyn knows a good bit about othering. There's some things about the Merlins that make them quite different from the rest of the Order contingent, right? So Cell is also othered in a sense of things I cannot say to you, because that's a big spoiler. Big no, Exquisite. You cannot go into further detail. But yeah, so we have our good old boy Selwyn, who is also constantly being othered and constantly being, like, singled out in a sense, right? And Nick, in some senses, is othered by the fact of how he is not, right? Nick is othered by him rejecting his He rejects his legacy and his technically inheritance that he got from his people and his line, right? He does not want to be King Arthur's scion, so he rejects it, and that is a weird thing to do. So that others him from the order. But in other ways, Nick completely fits into the mold in which he is supposed to quote unquote fit, right? So I'm once again back to talking about Bree, Nick, and Sel, but each of them are othered in their own ways, right? Each of them have, and while Brianna is othered the most, obviously, because she not only is she black, but she's also a woman, and she also has nothing to do with any of this, right? So because of that, she has all that going on, right? So my girl Bree has so much going on in her life. But yeah, so she is dealing with being an other in an area where they are the reason that she is othered, if that makes sense. So all of this going on, and you're like, Exquisite, why is it important? And I'm going to say that when we as a people want to interact and be a diverse group, right, we have to deal with, in some cases, we are going to be othered. I'm othered constantly being in an area surrounded by people who don't look like me or act like me or have my different intersections of being, right? So this book kind of shows us from the point of view of Brianna, who is the othered person majority of the time. Almost all the time, in a sense. And what she needs to go through in order to combat this othering and in order to regain her personhood and her autonomy, in a sense. Like, she's not going to let actions happen to her. Even though they do happen to her, she has to do them. She has to be about it. Like, Bree is always about it. We know this about our good girl Brianna, but she has to actively be about it and combat against these things that are working against her, right? So yes, that's our good and lovely and beautiful Brianna. And that's all I'm going to talk about in this episode. I know this is a shorter episode than what you're used to. You're like, Exquisite, you just gave us 50-minute episode and a 20-minute episode. This episode is like 15 minutes, and I'm telling you, it's because I just wanted to talk about the other. There's a lot of things in part 3 that I didn't want to get into until I gave you a breakdown of part 3. So in the episode that's the breakdown, that may be a long episode, guys. In the episode that is the episode breakdown for this, that's when we're going to get into that. That's when we're going to talk about that. And I think it'll be very important. We may have a special guest. We may not. I really do hope we have one. We may have more than one. We will see. Once again, I hope you guys are all having a fantastic week. If you're a college student, happy almost December. It's time to get ready for, it's basically Christmas. Like, I'm about to queue up some Mariah Carey right now. Once again, you can follow me on Twitter at Exquisite WILL. You can follow me on YouTube at Exquisite Williams. If you're listening on YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me what you think. That'll help me with the algorithm. Yes, you can follow the Our Moment podcast at Our Moment Pod. And I just hope you all have a lovely, lovely, wonderful day. Thank you so much for listening to me. Bye.